Welcome to Tom Talks. Join me once a week right here on Tom Boley YouTube channel. We're going to break down all the latest and greatest walleye fishing tips, walleye fishing tricks, the absolute location where these fish are right now, and all the practical relevant information you want and need. Hooked up. And look at that, just gone. For all the information you want and need, stay tuned right here once a week, Tom Talks. What is going on, guys? Today we are back with another video, and we'll call this a Tom Talks just because we're sitting here, but I was not sure what to film this morning. I wanted to get a video up for you guys, and whenever I don't know what to film, I go back to the most commonly asked questions. And what are the most commonly asked questions? Well, they're almost always about side imaging sonar and down imaging interpretation and things of that nature. So that is what we're going to do. I actually used to do some of these, I think like last year, and it's kind of an exercise, but what we're going to do, it's going to be incredibly valuable for a lot of you guys who want to kind of learn about all this, you know, side imaging, down imaging and stuff, interpretation. It's kind of an exercise where basically I had 10 screenshots, 10 kind of different screenshots from different scenarios. I collect screenshots from my hummingbirds all year long, and I probably have several thousand screenshots on my computer of just unique situations or fish, you know, and relating to different kinds of structure and things like that. So basically what I have here is 10 of them, and we're going to kind of go through 10 of them, and I actually put this together yesterday, so I've already kind of forgot what a lot of these are, and it should be incredibly valuable for you guys. For any of you guys wondering, I run a Humminbird Helix Gen 3 system, which runs on the Plus, so it's kind of like currently right now the sharpest Humminbird display you can get. And yeah, we're just going to get right into it here. So like I said, I have 10 of them. I'm going to flip into them and open them and show you guys and kind of show you what I'm talking about here. So it should be very valuable for you guys. So number one, right here, here's what we got. So right away, what you can see is very thick weed. Well, it's 9 feet. It's 46-degree water temps. This is probably sometime this fall that I took this screenshot. But what you can see right away is some very thick weeds that kind of run like this. So my guess is what happened is it's obviously deeper over here. So I started deeper, and what I did was I came up on to this hump or point or flat or whatever this is, and then I hit a weed line. And then on the back side of this weed line where I'm getting shallower is kind of like your inside weed edge. As you can see, it's shallower right here, and it kind of curves off like this as I came into it. So it was deeper here and shallower to where my boat is right now. So I kind of almost intersected this weed edge, right? And judging by what these weeds look like, this is definitely going to be mostly like your thicker milfoil or coontail type stuff. A real thick patch of it. And you can tell a lot of times when it casts a shadow like this, that it's real thick. And a lot of times the way milfoil grows, it'll be real patchy, where like you can see there's a lot of weeds here, no weeds right here, no weeds right here. You know, a lot of times if this was like cabbage or some other kind of fringe weed, what you would see is like weeds constantly around you, but they might be thinner and thicker in some areas. Here it's just super thick and then nothing. But as far as what do we see for fish go, there's definitely fish right here packed into the back side of this weed edge on the shallow side. You can definitely 100% see them right there. I'm kind of circling with the mouse. There's also some fish out here on the deeper side or the outside edge of this weed. There might be a fish like right here, right here, right here, and right here as well. It's not always just like so good you can see, and a lot of that has to do with how you hit those fish. You know, if you hit them and you're going at 2 miles an hour perfectly perpendicular and those fish are sitting there, you're probably going to get a really good image. But a lot of times if you're kind of turning and swinging, you might not see those fish as well, like these ones right here. But these ones you can definitely kind of see, like there's some higher lines here, brighter lines up off the bottom, and you're not always going to see those either, but you can tell you're getting those nice shadows. Most of the time the shadows are going to be more obvious than the actual fish, right? So you can see there's definitely some fish right there. And this is something I see a lot this time of year when I'm fishing shallow water. Fish packed into the backside of a weed bed, or fish right on the outside like this. And you can tell it's pretty hard bottom everywhere. As you kind of fade out, you can see I got mine set at 90 feet, which is pretty common for me. And it kind of fades out and it's getting a little bit darker over here, which kind of happens a lot when you're fishing. I would say in water, you know, less than 10 feet. You know, if you were in like 4 feet of water, you'd probably see that start to fade somewhere in here. You can't get the same range you can get you know, in like 5-6 feet of water as you can when you're in like 15-20 feet of water. So yeah, I guess that's kind of this one. It looks like we're coming up on a spot, solid weed line right here, and then fish sitting on the backside and the outside of this. So I guess if you're gonna fish this spot, you know, I'd be dropping waypoints right here, right here, and right here, and I'd probably try to sit somewhere out in here, and I'd either pitch back to this weed edge or I'd pitch up on the inside of this weed edge. So yeah, that's kind of that. All right, screenshot number 2, very different screenshot. This one is only down imaging and sonar. So obviously at this time of year, I'm fishing a deeper water pattern. The water temp is 63 degrees, and we're in 30 feet of water. Now, what you see right here is obviously, you know, your eyes want to go to this right here. What is this? What is this? What is this huge blob of stuff? These things are very small perch or minnows or bluegills, or most of the time in the lakes I fish, perch will look like this. And most of the time those perch are gonna be about that long, like 3 inches or under a lot of times. And they'll pack in real tight, and they'll kind of get high in the water column a lot of times, kind of depending on the day. A lot of times if you have a lot of sun, you'll see these pods very high. If you don't have a lot of sun, you'll see them kind of down lower like this here. But there's obviously, for the one screenshot, I mean, you can imagine this is probably like 20 feet of linear movement probably. A lot of bait life, right? Now, what do you have down here on the bottom? Well, right here, these are definitely walleyes, and I don't remember what I was doing or anything when this was, but my guess is 63 degrees, and if I was in 30 feet of water, it was probably a fall bite, and it was probably like the just pre-turnover bite. And a lot of times that's when I fish walleyes deeper than any other time of year. And this is just kind of looks like a hard bottom sand flat, maybe a gravel flat, but you can see, and this is one thing you see a lot at this end time of year, right before turnover happens, is number one, fish can be, you can all of a sudden lose fish that time of year. It's kind of like just past your late summer. A lot of times in my area, this would be like, I would say mid-September to like that first week in October is when you're doing this, and that can be a real finicky time. Post turnover, fish a lot of times shoot way back up shallow. That just pre-turnover, a lot of times the fish are no longer on like their key summer spots, but you end up fishing them on a lot of their transition areas on big deep water flats. And this is kind of what this is here. And a lot of times, I can tell you right now, these are probably eater sized walleyes. But they are up off the bottom and they are packed up, which is normally a good sign as far as catching them goes. If I was fishing in this situation, I would probably either be trying to troll something depending on how big this flat was, or if it was not a very big area, I would probably try to jig them with something like a hyper rattle or something quick and aggressive like that. So yeah, this is what I'm seeing here. Big bait, big balls of bait, big ball of bait, big ball of bait, packed up walleyes, and probably some more walleyes over here. And this is one reason I always say, if you could split screen, run both side imaging and down, or not side imaging, down imaging. Run down imaging and sonar at the same time when you're fishing these deep water bites, because you don't see what this is at all on sonar, right? It doesn't really show anything, and it's probably kind of diluted because you got this bait ball so close to it. But you can see there's a decent fish right there, and probably a couple more of them right there. So that is that. All right, moving on to another side imaging shot. This one's very different, and there's a lot going on right here. 15 feet, it is 67 degree water. Now, what I see, first of all, we'll talk about structure right away here. We have a hardcore rock line right here. And one thing you'll probably notice is that it looks like I'm probably coming from shallower water, and I'm probably like driving over the point or the tail end of a hump. You can kind of imagine it goes like this, and I'm driving over it right here. Because it's dropping off much quicker over here. As you can see, it's about to drop off pretty quick, and it's kind of flat in here, but this right here is the high spot, and you can tell obviously because it's real close right here and right here to that center line. And a lot of times what you'll see is a point like this. First of all, we got a bunch of weeds right here and a bunch of weeds right in here, right? And a lot of times you'll have rock that runs the highest point of that piece of structure, right? So this rock line probably goes a long ways up the shallow water this way, and it probably goes a little bit out this way until it just breaks out kind of to the basin. But then we got a ton of weeds kind of packed in here. Now, I'm not really seeing like any fish on this screenshot, but if you see something like this, it is honestly probably one of those spots that's just worth fishing. Like right here, big rock, big rock, big rock, big rock. Some good rocks in here, and then it kind of just transitions out here. So probably what I would do is I would drop a waypoint like here, 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 and here. And then you kind of know right where that spine is at. And a lot of times, you know, this is just one of those spots that has enough character where there's probably going to be some kind of fish on it, right? And this is just a kind of a good looking structural screenshot for the most part. And yeah, I mean, what's the water temp here? 67 degrees. So I'm not sure if this was in the spring or in the fall. If this was in the spring, this would definitely be a good spot to fish because 67 degrees is a lot of times like June period. But just with this much structural element going on, definitely always a spot that's worth a shot. So hopefully that was valuable for you guys. Moving on to number 4, and this is a very different one here. So what we have here, this is just a thick weed bed. Actually, it's not like super incredibly thick, but it's all very flat. You can see we're in 10 feet right here, and there's kind of, it just looks like mush, right? There's not, you can't really like decipher a lot. It kind of just looks like a broken up weed bed that's just kind of like, you know, weeds throughout. It's just a big 10-foot weed flat is what it looks like here. But what you can see in here is like there's definitely a fish right here. There's definitely a fish right here. You can see the white line and then the shadow right here. There's definitely a fish right here that's a little bit up off bottom. And then you got some of these other like phantom marks, right? Don't think like every time you see, you know, something you have to be like, oh, is that a fish? Is it, you know, there's just a lot of times, like I say, where you just don't know. But one good thing, you know, is like, all right, so if this is definitely a fish, this is definitely a fish, this is definitely a fish, right? So it makes me think that these are also probably fish, right? Because a lot of times, you know, there's not just gonna be like 2 fish in a spot. So a lot of times just a couple of for sures can answer a lot of the unsures, right? And given that this is just a really pretty dense weed bed, I got a feeling that what I was, 64 degree water temps, 10 feet of water, big weed bed, I got a feeling what I was probably doing was I was probably pulling spinners by hand in kind of that early June through June period where I'm just kind of like going down a weed bed with the trolling motor and I'm just kind of pulling through it. A lot of times what you'll see in a big weed bed like this, where there's no like distinguishing spots, is what you'll see is fish, there won't be just like one really big pot of fish. It'll just kind of be like a screenshot like this, and then you might go 30 yards and there might be another screenshot like this off the other side. These kind of just loosely potted up things of fish, you know, versus if you have like a weed bed where it's like, you know, big clump of weeds here, 50 yards, big clump of weeds here, you know, rocks and then weeds here with a lot of specific elements to that weed bed. That's kind of the spot where you would see like, you know, where you'd be fishing specific targets. This kind of weed bed's more so like, you're just gonna have to like cover water to get through here. You know, you could pull a spinner, or you could like kind of snap jig through it, kind of depending on how thick it is. Something like that, but something a little bit more water covering. So we'll move on to number 5 here. See what we got. All right, so this is definitely a very different time of year here. 76 degree water, so it's definitely your midsummer period right here. The boat is currently in 21 feet. I was just coming out of deeper water here, probably closer to 30 feet of water. And kind of the first thing that I'm seeing here, so obviously it kind of looks like I was zigging and zagging like in and out of a hump or a point or a break line or something like that here. But obviously what you have right here is fish right here on sonar, 100%, right? And if you had a down imaging shot, if I took a down imaging screenshot of this, what I would see is like more individualized, but because, and there's actually some more right here falling off on the corner, but because I don't, it kind of looks more just like a cluster of red mush, but it's 100% fish and they're definitely a little bit off bottom. They're kind of relating to that drop on this. Now over to the side imaging, kind of the most notable thing here, right, is all of these fish, right? And definitely most of these are fish, 100%. There doesn't look like there's a lot of rock on this. It definitely looks like more sand. But I mean, these are 100% fish over here. Now, what does that tell us? Well, number 1, it tells us there's a lot of fish here, right? But number 2, it tells us if you were just looking at this, you'd be like, okay, there's a few fish here, right? There's a good little bundle here. But if you didn't have side imaging on when you went over this, you would never see all of this other mass of fish relating to the tail end of this hump, right? So my guess is 76 degrees, it's probably midsummer. I was probably, I doubt I would be trolling this spot just due to the massive depth variance. What I was probably doing was probably pitching something like a hyper rattle or a snap jig back to them in this scenario, right? A lot of times this much up and down would obviously be tough to troll. So that would be my guess, but definitely a lot of fish and definitely a good, I mean, this screen right here, this sonar plus side imaging, is the screen that I look at 99% of the time, right? It's kind of the main screen I leave open. Unless I know I'm just gonna be in like 8 feet of water all day, then a lot of times I'll leave just a full screen side imaging open because I'm not really gonna see anything on sonar. But for most of the summer, this is the screen, and most times a year, this is the screen I'm looking at. I split screen at sonar, like 30% and then 70% side imaging like that, kind of to give you the best all-around picture, what's right underneath you and what's off to the sides of you. So moving on, what do we got here? All right, so this kind of plays in well. So that last weed screenshot I was talking about, which was this one, is just like a massive amount of weeds kind of all around you, right? Now this one is the other scenario, right? We can see we have mostly a sand flat here and a really thick pocket of weeds right here, which is not going to be cabbage. This is pretty much for sure going to be like milfoil or something like that. And yeah, that's, I mean, there's another patch of weeds here, a couple weeds here, but not really a lot for weeds. This is probably like a log on the bottom. This might be like a fringy patch of weeds here on the bottom, and then maybe some weeds right under the boat here, like you can also see on sonar. But what we have here is like your isolated target in a weed bed, and you can see there's walleye, bunch of walleyes relating to either the inside or outside edge of this very thick patch of weeds right here, right? And it's kind of lake to lake a lot of times. It's either like, a lot of times you'll have a lake that has a lot of this really thick patchy stuff, or you're fishing in a lake that has more of that clean, just kind of, you know, cabbage and fringe weed kind of everywhere, right? Where you're more so looking for like pockets or voids or fish scattered through that stuff. But some of the lakes that I fish in northern Wisconsin, northern Minnesota fall into this category where you'll get up on top a lot of these, you know, let's say 8 to 17 foot flats, and you run into a lot of this milfoily stuff. And this stuff's really easy to fish, and it's nice to fish. And the main reason for it is you could see most of the fish. There's never really gonna be walleyes like inside of this stuff. So you never have to worry about like, how am I gonna fish in this pocket of milfoil that's so thick it's impossible to get into. Most of the time in these scenarios, you're looking at something like this with fish relating just to the outside of it. So yeah, that's kind of that one. Moving on. All right, so this is definitely a different type of screenshot here. 30 feet of water and 63 degrees. And this is probably that just pre-turnover, late September, early October transition period. And first thing obviously you can see is some fish on sonar here. They look a lot better on down imaging, which is one reason if you're fishing a lot of deep water, I like to run this screen a lot because it gives you much better interpretation. It's nice to look at those red arcs, but a lot of times they will look much better. And like you can pretty much see here, you can count the fish, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8, maybe 9 fish right there, who knows. But the other thing to note is this is something you see a lot at this transition time frame. Look how thick this red line is right here. And it's super hard, and it just fizzles out, right? And then you start getting this kind of like mushy green looking line, right? And that is where the hard bottom turns into the soft bottom, right? And there's not a whole lot of depth change there, and a lot of times there really isn't a lot of depth change on these transition areas. Sometimes there will be, but a lot of times there won't be. And these are kind of like sneaky spots where not a lot of guys get on, and I really like fishing because they hold a lot of fish in this late September period. But you can see it here too, very hard, very crisp, very bright, and then it's just kind of like mushy, darker colored, right? And this is something you see a lot where those fish and bait fish in that transition period will relate very closely to that hard to soft bottom transition. And it's not going to be like rock, mud. A lot of times what you're going to be talking about is just sand, and then it's just going to transition into that silty, softer bottom. So that's kind of a walleyes relating a couple feet up above a hard to soft bottom transition. All right, 13. This is a very different one, which we have not looked at. This is actually screenshot number 8 here, but 13 feet of water, 48 degrees. And I can already tell you by looking at the screenshot what I was doing this day. And I was probably fishing for some staging pre-spawn smallmouth bass, right? And most times smallmouth spawn, you know, kind of at that upper 50 degree range, you start to see the magic happening. But how do you get on fish that are staging to spawn? Well, one big key when you're bass fishing is something like this right here. What is that? What is this? And probably what is this as well? These are spawn beds from the year before, right? And yes, side imaging is definitely good enough to pick that kind of stuff up. And a lot of times that's what we'll do. We'll drive around a lot of these big spawning flats, which in northern Wisconsin might be anywhere from 5 feet to 16 feet of water a lot of times. They will spawn pretty deep in a lot of our deep clear lakes up here. and look for these spawn beds that look something like this, right? And this is definitely an area. You can see we got like a rock line right here, kind of rocky gravel, and it kind of fades out to sand, and then come kind of like loose rock. So this is definitely a high spot right here. You can see the way this rock kind of like tails through this spot, kind of like the mouse is going right now. And you can see it's a little higher here, a little higher here. So that might only be a foot difference, but you can see there's definitely like spawn beds that are relating, you know, to that kind of stuff. And there might be one right there, but that's kind of inconclusive, right? So yeah, this is just kind of it looks like a big smallmouth rock gravel sand spawning flat, kind of exactly what they like, and then a few spawn beds kind of relating to it. So yeah, that's that one. And 48 degrees, definitely pre-spawn. All right, moving on. Screenshot number 9. What do we got here? This is 77 degree water, and I'm in 50 feet of water, so I can tell you exactly what I'm doing on this day. I'm trolling for suspended walleyes. And what is the picture of here? Is there any walleyes in this picture? Inconclusive. Don't really know, right? These ones might be a walleye, kind of like right here and right here, but I'm not gonna say that for sure. But a lot of times it doesn't really matter, right? Because on this day, I guarantee you I was trolling, you know, 3 rods or 6 rods or 9 rods, depending on how many people I had in my boat. And this is exactly what you want to see when you're in this scenario. You can kind of see like a layering of the water starting here. Like right here, you can kind of see a line, and then right here, you can kind of see a line. So there's definitely a thermocline going on, and then you can even see another line kind of down here real deep. But you can definitely see some layering as far as, you know, the thermocline goes or temperature goes in this water column. And this is one thing you see a lot on a lot of your very deep, very clear natural lakes, right? What are all these much bigger marks, right? These bigger marks are probably ciscos or whitefish, and you can tell that because they are big marks. They're down deep, and they're probably one of the only fish that are going to be that down deep, right? And they're, you know, probably 45 to 50 feet down is kind of what it looks like here. And you know, will these fish move up in the water column? They definitely will. And walleyes, big fish, big predator fish, everything, love being around these things. These things are just like the gravy train for, you know, all big predators, whether you're a walleye, a pike, or muskie, anything like that. Now, what are these? What are these bigger clouds up here? These, I kind of said it before, these are going to be like your panfish or perch, smaller fish bundled up real tight that are moving around out over basin. You don't see a whole lot of this kind of stuff in like May and June, and that's because a lot of these younger juvenile fish are still packed up in the weeds. But these fish a lot of times dictate the depth at which I'm going to troll, right? So you can see this one's kind of like just below 20 feet. This one's probably like 25 feet down. And this is exactly what you want to see. You got a lot of life down deep, you got a lot of life up high, and you know, I guarantee if you do some loop-de-loops through this area, you're going to see a whole bunch more of this bait and probably some fish as well, right? So a lot of times if I'm trolling this scenario, I might stack baits like 19 feet down to like, you know, 24 feet down, right? So a lot of times you can dictate what you're seeing off this, you know, how high this beta is off, and kind of dictate how far down you want to troll based on that. But if you're trolling open water and you feel like you're lost, if you're seeing this kind of stuff, I guarantee you are around the right fish. So, and 77 degrees, that was definitely a peak summer water temperature. So we'll keep moving on here. So this is number 10. This is our last one. And there's a lot going on in this screenshot. I'll give you guys a second to take it in here. But 67 degrees, and I'm in 14 feet of water. So this is probably a June time frame screenshot, I would say, and it is a very massively thick weed bed, and you can tell that because you can't hardly see anything. There's big shadows like this everywhere, and that's the backside where it just can't really read through the weeds. But what you see here and where the fish are is in this pocket in the weeds. You can see in this screenshot, this is the only area where there isn't really thick weeds, and lo and behold, there's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you know, I mean, there's probably like 15 fish in this small little pocket here where there's not any weeds. And that is something you see a lot, both in the spring when you're fishing weeds and the fall when I'm fishing weeds. There's a lot of times fish love those pockets which are void of weeds in a very big area with very thick weeds, right? And yeah, that's kind of what this is. And you know, and a lot of times we'll kind of laugh about it now, but you'll be going down a weed bed and on a lake where we've never been to, and we'll hit one of these big pockets that's void of weeds in a really thick area, and we're like, huh, there's no fish. Why is there no fish here, right? Because you get so accustomed to seeing fish in those pockets so many times over and over that when you don't, it's almost a surprise a lot of times. They love clean edges where it kind of goes out, you know, you got really, really thick weeds, and then boom, you know, no weeds, and then it comes back into really thick weeds. They love those seams, and then they just love void pockets and weeds that look something like this here. In these kind of areas, a lot of times what you might do is you might like spot lock right here, and you'll be trying to like hit that area, and you just keep getting really thick weeds and really thick weeds. Then you'll kind of find that one casting angle where you're in that pocket and you start catching fish. And then it's just remembering to like trying to figure out, you know, line it up with a house on the shoreline or something like that, and just keep making that same cast over and over and catching fish. So yeah, that's kind of that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this little exercise. I am about to get in the boat and go fishing. I just wanted to do a quick little video here for you guys. Hopefully it was useful for you guys. I appreciate you guys watching all this content, and if you're not yet, please subscribe. Stay tuned for more. I'm about to go on a boat, like I said, and I don't even know what we're gonna fish for yet, but it finally got cold. It's finally very November-like outside again. But yeah, we're gonna get it done. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more. We'll see you guys next time.